Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea's Trade Minister Yeo returned home after wrapping up his trip to the United States, where he held talks with American officials aimed at easing tariff pressures. He pledged to continue negotiations, but still faced criticism for coming back empty-handed. Leaders of the United States and China held a phone call 2 months ahead of President Trump's expected visit to Beijing. Trump said they had a positive conversation on global conflicts, including the Ukraine war, the situations in Iran and Taiwan, and added that China reaffirmed plans to buy more U.S. farm soybeans. The Trump administration announced that it plans to create a critical minerals trading bloc and has called on its allies, including South Korea, to join as part of an apparent effort to counter China. We begin this morning with South Korea's Trade Minister Yeo, who has returned home after a visit to Washington aimed at easing mounting U.S. pressure over a proposed tariff hike. Speaking to reporters at Incheon International Airport this morning, he acknowledged that he did not meet U.S. Trade Representative Chief Jamieson Greer, but said he had held multiple rounds of working-level talks with the USTR over the past several weeks. He stressed that Seoul is ready to faithfully and swiftly implement its tariff agreement with Washington, arguing that an immediate tariff increase would be inappropriate given South Korea's good faith efforts. He further added that he plans to continue talks with the USTR next week, saying bipartisan efforts in the National Assembly to fast-track a special law on U.S. investment would help address Washington's concerns and prevent misunderstandings. So South Korea's top trade negotiator is now back in Seoul after trade talks with the United States. But tariff concerns still remain. As Seoul works to resolve tariff hike threats from the United States, top diplomats of South Korea and the U.S. also met in Washington, D.C. to address security and trade issues. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Andrew Millard, Assistant Professor of International Relations at Changwon National University. Professor Miller, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So South Korean Trade Minister has now returned home, but is facing criticism that he came back empty-handed. And tariff issues were also discussed when South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun met his U.S. counterpart in Washington. How do you think the tariff negotiations will play out from now on?
So these tariff negotiations, they seem to be never-ending. But what's very important to remember is these tariffs, if you go back to the start of Donald Trump's second term in office, this was his main foreign policy tool. This was the main tool he used to really influence countries all over the world to trade more with the US. Now, as we've seen over time, as countries have got more used to these tariff sort of tactics, they're pushing back a little bit. Now, there also is a very big question mark looming over the legality of these tariffs. So right now, the biggest problem for the US and for other countries like South Korea is these tariffs are creating a lot of uncertainty. So what we really need to sort out first, and this needs to be done in the United States through the Supreme Court, make a decision on the legality of these tariffs. So I think it's a very good position for South Korea not to be rushing into any decisions, not to be capitulating, not to be giving into the American pressure, to sit back, wait for another 2 or 3 weeks with the Supreme Court makes that final decision, then we can continue on with the negotiations. So I think right now there's definitely uncertainty for the American economy, the American government, the Federal Reserve. They need some more certainty to make their rates. But also for South Korean companies, we need to really get some final decisions before moving ahead.
I see. And the Trump administration has been blaming Seoul's legislature for not implementing a deal struck last year. But some analysts do say that other factors may be at play, like investigations involving Kupang or the parliament's push to pass the Online Platform Act. What's your take on this?
So again, I think all of these are going to come into play in some way, but definitely the main problem, the main issue for the Americans is they signed this deal a few months ago but the South Koreans, they still haven't ratified this special act. So this is what the Americans want to push for. And this sort of links in with American domestic policies, because right now, Donald Trump, the Trump administration, they look for these photo opportunities where they can bring these achievements, these economic achievements back to America, show the American people, we are achieving this on the economy. We're bringing in $350 billion worth of investment from South Korea. So when the South Koreans don't fully ratify this, this sort of takes the shine off the American achievements. So they will want to be pushing this issue, but of course, they'll be pressuring South Korea and they'll be using any sort of leverage they can to really increase the pressure. So the digital regulations that the South Koreans are sort of trying to enact, the Americans, they were very quick through the American embassy in Seoul to criticize these regulations and say, this is going to really damage a lot of American companies doing business in Korea. So again, all of it adds up, but very much the main issue is the American government wants this deal, wants this negotiation finished so they can show to their domestic supporters the achievements they made.
All right, and beyond trade issues, the foreign ministers of South Korea and the U.S. also talked about ways to implement agreements outlined in the joint summit fact sheet signed by President Ian Trump late last year. Can we expect the two sides to speed up cooperation on projects like building nuclear power submarines?
It's very possible. So what we've seen is over the past sort of 6-9 months, we've definitely seen some ups and downs in the relationship, in the negotiations between the Trump administration and the Lee administration. But what this shows us is that even though there is a little bit of tension, the South Korea-US relationship, it's still very strong. They're still close partners. And we have sort of the trade issues, the tariff negotiations are going, but separately, we have a very strong security partnership between the two, also including Japan as well. So even though trade and tariff negotiations may be going a little bit slower, it's very likely that on those security issues, so for example, nuclear-powered submarines, nuclear fuel enrichment in South Korea, and so on, we're likely to see maybe not accelerated cooperation, but definitely a much faster momentum. They'll keep that security cooperation going because really, for South Korea, America, and also for Japan, maintaining this security cooperation is very much a win-win.
Right, and the State Department also said the two sides also talked about denuclearization of North Korea, and they also highlighted the importance of trilateral cooperation with Japan. There are concerns that the Trump administration's focus is sort of shifting away from North Korea more toward homeland security. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, without doubt, we've definitely seen over the past few months, especially, that America, its focus very much is on the Western Hemisphere. So we've seen the attacks on lots of boats in the Caribbean Sea. We've seen attack on Venezuela, talks of Greenland and so on. So very much the public shift, the visual shift in foreign policy is towards the Western Hemisphere, which fits in very nicely with the Trump administration's Make America Great Again policies, America First policies. However, both America and also South Korea, there has not been any official change in policy towards North Korea. There's been nothing said about that. And also, if we look at the Americans' foreign policy, even though the focus has been more on the Western Hemisphere, they are still involved in Gaza. They have been involved in Yemen, Syria. It's very much involved in Iran. So it's not completely only Western Hemisphere, but definitely the visual shift is more to that sort of region. The only sort of area we'd have to be concerned about is in the future, if the Donald Trump administration decides to have a significant withdrawal of troops from South Korea, then we could say there would be a significant shift in policy. But right now, South Korea, America, the official policies remain on denuclearization of North Korea.
I see. I guess it's pretty hard to tell as of now. All right, Professor Miller, thank you so much for your time this morning. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have held what Trump called a long and positive conversation on trade, Taiwan, and global conflicts ahead of a planned Beijing summit. The talks come as China also steps up coordination with Russia, highlighting shifting dynamics among major powers. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he held a long and thorough and positive phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday, covering issues from trade to global security in talks that could set the stage for his planned visit to Beijing in April. In a post on Truth Social on the same day, President Trump said the two leaders discussed the war in Ukraine, the situation in Iran, and Taiwan. He noted Taiwan had not come up during their first in-person meeting in South Korea late last year, suggesting it could become a key topic in upcoming talks. China's foreign ministry confirmed that Taiwan was discussed and underscored the sensitivity of the topic. Beijing described Taiwan as the most important issue in China-U.S. relations, tied to China's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It also urged Washington to handle arms sales to Taiwan with caution. At the same time, China signaled it remains open to dialogue. In its statement, Beijing expressed hope that 2026 could be a year of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation, while warning that China has its own concerns and will match words with actions. On trade, President Trump said China reaffirmed plans to buy more U.S. energy and agricultural products. He pointed to possible increases in soybean purchases to as much as 20 million tons in the current season, along with discussions on airplane deliveries. Calling his relationship with Xi extremely good, Trump said both sides recognize the importance of stable ties and predicted positive results over the next 3 years. The call marks their first since late November and comes as the two powers balance strategic rivalry with deep economic links. It also raises the possibility that Trump's April trip to China could create diplomatic openings on North Korea, though it is unclear whether Pyongyang is ready to engage. Meanwhile, Xi and Russian President Vladimir Putin recently held a separate video call focused on strengthening cooperation, maintaining strategic stability, and coordinating their approach to the United States. The two leaders have continued to highlight their partnership amid tensions with the West, signaling that Beijing and Moscow intend to keep close communication on security and geopolitical issues. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Washington is also stepping up its push to secure the raw materials that power everything from weapon systems to electric vehicles, as it calls on its allies, including South Korea, to join a new trade bloc for critical minerals. The move is seen as an apparent effort to defend against China's stranglehold on the key minerals. Our Moon Hee-reon has the details.
The United States has formally moved to rally allies into a new trade bloc aimed at reshaping global supply chains for critical minerals, resources essential to defense systems and advanced industries, and has invited South Korea to take part. The initiative was unveiled on Wednesday at a ministerial-level meeting in Washington, where U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance announced plans to establish what he called a critical minerals trading bloc, designed to diversify supply chains and reduce over-reliance on any single country. Vance said that while much attention is paid to the digital and high-tech economy, growth ultimately depends on tangible resources.
There's no realer thing than critical minerals. And I think a lot of us have learned the hard way, in some ways, over the last year, how much our economies depend on these critical minerals.
At the core of the proposal is a preferential trade zone for global supply chains for critical minerals. Under the plan, benchmark prices would be set at each stage of production to reflect what U.S. officials describe as fair market value, with adjustable tariffs acting as a backstop against external shocks. The meeting was attended by South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun alongside officials from Australia, India, and Japan. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the United States is seeking to collaborate with 55 partner countries on what has been dubbed the New Forge Initiative, noting that many have already signed on. He warns that global supply chains for critical minerals are heavily concentrated in the hands of one country, leaving them vulnerable to geopolitical leverage and disruptions ranging from political instability to pandemics. While Japan, Australia, Saudi Arabia, and Thailand have reportedly signed cooperation frameworks with Washington, South Korea has yet to do so and is still reviewing its participation. The push underscores how critical minerals are increasingly viewed not just as commodities but as strategic assets, central to economic growth, industrial competitiveness, and national security. 문혜련, Arirang News.
And staying in the United States, President Donald Trump reportedly told Georgia's governor that he was initially unaware of the immigration raid that led to the arrest of hundreds of Korean workers last September. According to the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, citing administration officials, the operation was part of a tougher immigration crackdown led by White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. It added that Trump privately said he did not know about the arrests and later told aides he did not want large-scale raids at factories and farms. On September 4th, immigration authorities detained more than 300 Korean workers at a Hyundai Motor Group and LG Energy Solution joint battery plant construction site in Georgia. Governor Brian Kemp then called President Trump to request their release. Meanwhile, President Lee Jae-myung hosted a gathering of South Korea's top business leaders at the Blue House on Wednesday to discuss boosting regional growth and jobs for young people. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
President Lee Jae-myung is stepping up his outreach to business leaders as he seeks to build a healthier economic ecosystem.
경제는 생태계라고 하는데 너무 당연한 얘기이기도 하지만 풀밭도 있고 메뚜기도 있고 토끼도 있고 그래야 호랑이도 건강하게 살아갈 수 있는 것인데 자칫 잘못하면 풀밭이 다 망가질 경우도 있겠다.
President Lee invited leaders of South Korea's major conglomerates, including Samsung Electronics, SK, Hyundai Motor Group, and LG, to the Blue House on Wednesday. Acknowledging that their efforts have helped put the domestic economy back on track, the president said the next task is to ensure that the benefits of growth are shared more evenly.
어쨌든 이 성장의 과실, 성장의 기회들이 중소기업에게도 또 수도권 중심인 대한민국에서는 좀 지방에도 또 이미 일정한 위치를 차지한 기성세대뿐만이 아니라 새롭게 우리 사회에 진입하는 청년 세대들에게도 좀 골고루 옮기가.
For that, Lee urged business leaders to expand job openings for young people, pledging that the government will increase financial support for employment and training programs run by businesses. He also laid out plans to expand budget and infrastructure investment beyond the capital, calling on businesses to shift away from capital-focused growth. In response, the 10 companies that attended Wednesday's gathering pledged to invest 270 trillion won, roughly $186 billion in areas outside the capital region over a 5-year period, starting with 66 trillion won this year alone. At the same time, they announced plans to increase hiring beyond their original targets.
The 10 companies plan to hire a total of 51,600 workers this year, about 2,500 more than last year, notably 66%, or roughly 34,200 will be first-time hires.
Wednesday's meeting was President Lee's latest efforts to rally the business community behind two of his top policy priorities, reducing regional disparity and creating more jobs for future generations. He delivered the same message to foreign invested companies last week. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
BTS comeback show at Gwanghwamun Square next month is drawing massive global attention. With expectations soaring, fans around the world are eager to see how the performance will play out. Our culture correspondent Park Geon-woo gives us a preview.
After years on the world's biggest stage, 7 voices are returning to where their story began. The kings of K-pop, BTS, are coming back with Arirang, a live comeback show at one of Korea's most symbolic sites, Gwanghwamun Square in central Seoul. According to Seoul city officials and industry insiders, the show's host has applied to use not only the square, but also the inner grounds of Gyeongbokgung Palace. That has fueled speculation that BTS may make a ceremonial walk along the so-called King's Road, starting at Keunjeongmun Gate, passing through Hungyemun, the palace's second gate, and emerging through the three doors of Gwanghwamun before stepping onto the plaza where the main stage is expected to be built. Officials say discussions are still underway on whether the opening will take place live or as a pre-recorded sequence. Following the opening, all 7 members are set to perform together in front of armies from around the world, joined by dancers and the Arirang Gugak Group, a traditional Korean music ensemble. With their new album titled Arirang, Korea's most iconic folk song, the decision to begin full group promotions at this site carries special meaning. The location is both a historic landmark and a modern symbol of Korea, known for major protests and World Cup fan parks. Organizers are planning to accommodate around 15,000 people on site, with additional crowds expected nearby, including at Seoul Plaza, where people even without tickets can watch through large screens installed. Including nearby areas, officials estimate that up to 200,000 people could gather. With those numbers in mind, the Seoul Metropolitan Government held a safety meeting on Wednesday, preparing crowd control, emergency access routes, traffic plans, and multilingual safety messages. The show will also be live-streamed worldwide on Netflix. March 21st at 8 p.m., just one day after the album's release, BTS will make their return on a site that was once reserved for kings, but is now shared with the world. 박건우, Arirang News.
The cold has eased, but air quality continues to be a concern. Ultrafine dust levels are bad across much of the country, and from late this afternoon, additional overseas pollutants will move in, pushing the levels to very bad overnight. Temperatures will remain milder than average through today, but dust will be washed away once the colder air arrives. Tomorrow morning, Seoul's temperatures will be dipping down to -8 degrees Celsius, then staying below freezing all day. Then even stronger cold wave will be arrive this weekend. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 8 degrees under cloudy skies. Meanwhile, southern provinces will be sunnier with Daegu, Gyeongju, Busan all topping out at 14 degrees Celsius. After a severe cold snap, temperatures should rise again on Monday afternoon, while Jeollado and Jeju are forecast to see lots of winter mix.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.